So hello everyone and welcome to my guest Sarah Van Soest, this beautiful human who is here today as a magnetic person, and I can't wait for you all to meet Sarah more intimately. I have given you a little bit of an introduction, Sarah, but I would love for you to now fill in the gaps for my listeners, please, because there's a particular reason why we are here today and why I want everyone to meet you.
Okay, hello everybody, and thank you so much, Kasha, for inviting me on your show. Why am I a magnetic person? That's an interesting question. I can only share with you some of my experiences, and perhaps that will give you some insight into how I've developed to be the person that I am.
Yeah, I would love that.
Well, I grew up in a very big family. I am the fourth youngest in a family of 13, or a family of 15, including my parents. So you can see that I grew up with, quite a community. And being so young, when I was 10, my older brothers and sisters already started to have their own kids. So I've really grown up with an array of ages ever since birth. I had a very wholesome childhood growing up on the farm, and we had a very idyllic childhood, growing our own vegetables, growing our own cattle, and also consuming them. Unfortunately, when I was 15, my mother passed away, and along with that came a lot of changes to my life. And it was really a very hard time, even though I had so many people around me. It was really at that time that I realized I didn't really have that many people at all. And shortly after that, I really made a commitment to myself that I wanted to leave this life and I wanted to create something even better for me. So after I finished university and I studied childhood education, principles of teaching and learning, I went overseas and I had the grand opportunity to really immerse myself in different cultures and see different ways of living, different values people had, and also different ways that people connect with one another. This has been a really big insight into my life, and really recognizing that one mold really doesn't fit. I mean, it really doesn't fit. So I think all these experiences combined has really helped me value good relationships and value each experience, and that each experience builds onto another, and that we must really equip our students with the independence and the ability to grow themselves and truly be their persons. And let's be honest, each kid comes into our lives, whether they're from us or from other people, but they are their own person already. So we need to respect that they are their own person, and help them find their own way in life and become everything that they can be.
Wow, I love that. This is why you are like my favorite teacher. Like, I have never met a teacher like you, Sarah, who really really fosters that in children, and really lets them know that they are individuals, that their thoughts, ideas matter. And I have been very lucky to observe is weird, to witness last year a little bit in your classroom how you work, and it blew me away, just the change in children, I guess. And again, it's not even from bad or whatever, but these were preppies, and preppies are generally like the biggest, I think, the biggest the biggest achievement is for them probably is to learn to read, right? To read, to write, to make sense of these random letters. And I went from seeing this chaos of like them trying to make sense of it to then really excelling in it and like feeling so confident. And I think that's the main part. They felt so confident. And a lot of the children that were shy or appeared shy, was a stranger in their classroom, really started to come out of the shell so quickly because they felt, I think, safe with you and what you taught. So you said that you studied, um, in this particular area, but also like done professional studying, but you've also immersed yourself in other cultures. Can you perhaps explain to us a little bit more how that has that immersing in other cultures, the travels that you've done, how they have really impacted you, like maybe specifically how they shaped you and your learning ways or teaching ways?
Hmm. Funnily enough, I was never very good at the English language. However, that didn't really stop me immersing myself into other languages. And I actually studied Japanese in high school. And recently I've come back from a stint in South America where I was able to pick up Spanish. These experiences have been very insightful as an adult, learning how we learn a language. With Japanese, it was an incredible experience because not only was I learning new words, but I had to learn their characters. And very much like these prep students, these random symbols I had to assign sounds to and then learn to decode them and then learn how to make the grammar all make sense. And so I've always enjoyed putting myself into that learner position, which really has helped me identify my learners and what they go through. In fact, I make it a practice to share with my students a learning journey and learn something along with them so they can see the struggles that I go through. And that struggle is actually a part of learning. Where success, if you're just reaching success, you're not pushing yourself, you're not learning. So when they can see that I'm struggling, that it's difficult for me, it breaks down that frustration, that wall of frustration which everyone comes to, and just allows them to relax on that. So that has been a big that has always been a must that I bring into my class. And it's not always language. It's sharing my musical journey with them also is something that, I show them. It's quite difficult. I'm not a genius at it yet. It's difficult, but I'm just having fun. And, each day I practice a little bit, and a little bit by little, I get better and better. Going back to my teaching philosophy, it is heavily influenced by the Reggio Emilia principles, which is a theory from Italy. And it really focuses on the rights of children and hearing the children's voice. And definitely would like what you said, Kasha, when we feel seen and heard, we change. We're not fighting to be seen and heard because we are seen and heard. And that takes away a lot of those behavior issues that you often see in classes where kids really just want to be recognized and heard. So in this practice, there's a lot of scribing of conversations, recording the children's words, and then using the children's words to guide the future lessons, whether they're conclusions or misconceptions. We put these words up so the children can have a discussion over the things that they are thinking about. And essentially, the learning isn't from a textbook. The learning is from that small community that we have inside that classroom.
Yeah, I loved how your classroom was full of posters. I can't, like normally you walk into a classroom and there's all these printed out posters that are neatly laminated. But your classroom was very unique because everything looked like it was made either by you or by the children or with the children. And like you said, there were quotes that the children have said. And I found that so refreshing and so wonderful, where I could actually see myself when I was sitting on the floor and going like to their level. And I'm like, I can see myself as this 6 or 7-year-old just being in this classroom and just in awe. I felt like, a child must feel such a sense of belonging in your classroom, because wherever it turns, there's something that either they said or their classmates said, or, like there was this real collaboration between you and the children. So my question is, because often when we think about the school curriculum, like it feels very like, I mean, it's no secret that I personally believe that the school curriculum, the way the schools are done, whether it's here, whether it's overseas, in particular countries that I'm familiar with, not maybe not pointing any fingers, but it is so outdated. It is so outdated, like it doesn't fit, it hasn't grown with the generations of children. And yet here you are, this breath of fresh air. Do you find that you have to like fight against the curriculum, or do you get are they say, hey, we're just happy for you to come and teach and do work your magic?
Okay, great questions. I just want to bring you back to that first point that you were talking about, having the children's work on the wall and fostering that sense of belonging. Not only does it foster that sense of belonging, but it also instills this pride, like that's my work, that's mine, and that's my friends. And more than that, or on top of that, I should say, is that it gives the children a chance to actually reflect on their work and reflect on their friends' work and actually improve through that reflection. So it's actually maximizing all that time that they're in the classroom, whether they're idly looking around or whether they've actually gone up and had a look at whatever is on the wall. They're actually doing reflection. And what we know from education and from long-term connections in learning is that reflection is a major key to that. So quite like an art gallery, the walls act as the walls act to interact with the kids and to have them go through that process without the teacher being there. Now, obviously, the teacher can also be there and can scaffold some specific learning with that. But as you probably saw, it's not really that necessary because the kids are so attracted to their work and to their friends' work. And it's just so great when they come in with their parents and it becomes a talking piece. And this is all this like incidental learning that happens outside of that regimented short time that we have allocated in this traditional setting classroom.
Yeah.
So going back to your final question about whether there's a wall to fight against, there absolutely is, especially with this big data that the governments are pushing for. And it's really so disappointing because so much gets lost. Teachers start teaching to the test and you lose all of that authentic learning. And really, what is education for? Education is for the children to expand the children, not on a superficial level. We're preparing them for their life. And if we're preparing them for a test, they leave school with such little skills and such little aptitudes to really handle real life. Beyond that, we know there has been a paradigm shift with AI, another paradigm shift which we knew was coming. And are the kids ready for that? We know that in the short time that AI has been around, 30% of people have lost their jobs. What jobs will be available, and what jobs will our students, our children need to create in order to survive in this economic world, which is already set up and doesn't seem to be really going anywhere anytime soon. So definitely there is a wall that I need to fight against. And a way of doing that, or my strategy for doing that, is really showing that the processes that I use actually work. And having people like you, Kasha, having an open classroom where parents can come in and see how the classroom operates, is a really good way to have the wider community come on board with that and see the value in that.
Oh, wow. So you've touched on so many topics that I'm actually really curious to know more about. I feel like we'll need to talk at some point, the AI and all that. But I have invited you to this podcast because you are, to me, a magnetic person, and to me, a magnetic person is someone who doesn't necessarily work in a spiritual arena, like you're not an energy healer or reader or psychic or whatever, but they embody everything that I talk about, and apply it in their job, which is whatever, like in your case, a teacher. So let's talk about like confidence and knowing your true authentic self then, because Sarah, as someone who, like you haven't worked in one school for, 30 years and people know you and whatever, you traveled, you moved. So I feel like you're constantly the newbie, the new teacher that came. And, it's, the imposter syndrome could sneak up, and it may shake your confidence. It may, question your own authenticity. How do you stand so firm and strong with your practices and who you are and how you show up and how you teach in a face of being that new teacher in these new environments?
Tasha, honestly, after the magic that I've seen, there's no way I can go back to being this false teacher of bowing to what the system says that must be done without having my own voice, being, my own views and my own experiences. And it's really the experiences that make me stand so strong and so firm, because I've seen it work time and time again. It's not guesswork. And it's very interesting. Like, sometimes people come into my classroom and it seems like the kids have a little bit more free reins, and they do have a bit more free reins because we are a community. I don't operate from this teacher of knowledge or have this teacher desk where you come and the teacher will assess you and she will give you goals.
I notice
We
you quite often on the floor with them, like, and you do. I have to say this was magical to me. You were probably the only teacher I've ever seen who does the role like so quietly, and like you don't even know, but it's done in the background. And usually it's done where the student, I even remember this, you had to say your full name, or you had to say, yes, I'm here, or present, or whatever. And it was this whole thing, and you had to say it this way, otherwise you get marked absent, which is so ridiculous. With Sarah, you don't even know when she's done it. She's filled it out and it's done.
Yeah, the most important way to begin the day is obviously on a positive note and on something meaningful. Everybody wants to do something important and meaningful for them in their days. So just recognizing that students are actually people, I just really relate to them. I try to relate to them like that. And on top of that, Akasha, I must admit that depending on the age of students that I have, it affects, the type of clothes that I wear, the way I do my hair, whether I use makeup or not, the type of language that I use. I really embody the energy of the age that I'm teaching in order to relate better to them and flow more with them. In the end, I want the children to be flying with their own education, and I'm putting in the resources they need in order to reach that success and to go actually beyond that.
Well, this is fascinating because now we're talking about energy manipulation. And when you mentioned that you kind of go with how what age group you're working with, how you present yourself. So can you tell us a bit more about this? Like, how do you gauge? How do you know? And does that mean for anyone who's questioning it, does that mean you change who you are, or there's certain aspects that you go like, Just explain it. Just explain it to us what that means.
Yeah,
And then,
I think we're always changing who we are depending on who we're talking to. So it's whether we're talking to our parents or we're talking to a boss, we're going to be showing different faces of ourselves. So it's quite like that with the kids. What is always constant is that I'm always facilitating their learning and always listening to what they're talking about and incorporating that into the lessons. So if they're interested in Pokemon. Listen, I've got no interest in Pokemon, but if Pokemon is going to take us from here to there and they're fanatics about that, and that's the only thing that, that they ever talk about, I'm willing to enter into their world. Really, every relationship in the classroom is a unique relationship for me. And um, I enter that relationship with, a lot of honor. I think it's a very sacred a position that I have to be able to influence these kids and to have their trust. And we know that when children have that strong bond, that they are able to, their brain is actually a lot more receptive. They're taking those risks and they're extending themselves. How do I know what kind of energy to provide in each moment? I think it's very subtle, and I think it comes back to my experience of being around kids ever since I was so young, and whilst I was growing, having that connection always to kids at the different ages. So most important, I suppose, isn't really so much the age, but knowing who people are and seeing everybody as an individual and seeing my students as an individual. You can imagine, however, how, perhaps I suppose it's really varied from it's a very tricky question to answer because
so when you,
it's very conscious. Like when I'm getting ready, it's very conscious, like what I'm going to wear. Am I going to wear something that's kind of crazy? Am I going to do my hair like you know crazily? Am I going to do it a little bit more formal? What's kind of needed. And I think it even does change depending, like, on the energy of those kids at that time. I remember like I remember last year I had a student who was very rebellious and, trying to find out what his triggers were. And I had thought at that moment, I'm like, I wonder if like my bright red lipstick is actually triggering him in a way. I mean, I don't know why, but I did actually stop wearing that lipstick. And I think there was a change. I never went back to to wearing, that shade
wow,
again. Mm, In terms of
wow.
energy, um, in other terms, like outside of myself and with the room energy, there's lots that I do inside the room too. I take away all those bright colors. I put their work on there on the walls, and I also use quality material. I don't use these cheap plastics. I try to use more natural woods and natural flowers and try to embody nature because we need to get back to that we actually are nature. And you'd be very surprised how many kids do not recognize that they too are a part of nature. And this is the essence of us all. So my philosophy in life is, I suppose, very spiritual based. I think I mean, it's who we are. It's what we are.
Mm.
So I really bring that into the classroom too, even though we're a non-religious. I mean, we're not religious, but we are who we are. We are nature, and that's
Yeah.
undeniable.
And we are a spirit. You can say it here on my podcast because we are, we're not
We
like
are.
machines, right? I really appreciate your answer because I mean, I that what you've described is manipulating energy, what I call manipulating energy. And I know it sounds like we're manipulating someone's free will, but it just means that you recognize what this person needs and you create that for them, right? Or you help them to shift their energy. And your example with the student and the lipstick, I mean, that is probably the best example, because you recognized a trigger or something that bothers him, maybe, and you were willing to work with it, as opposed to just go label him whatever, he's annoying or he's this or he's naughty. And and that takes a certain level of awareness to be able to connect to a child on a deeper level, as opposed to just what your physical senses present you, right? Because your physical senses will show you a student that's misbehaving or having outbursts or whatever, but somewhere there your spirit being is going, hang on, there's more to this, right? Which may have prompted you to then remove that lipstick for the next class and kind of play with that. So energy manipulation is very, very big, and I certainly understand it as well, how I do with clients. But to hear it being done in a classroom with a teacher is probably what I always aspire for other teachers to know, that you can affect children's energies. So that is the energy manipulation that we were talking about, which I'm such a big fan. And this is what I'm trying to say to people. You don't have to be a psychic. You don't have to be an energy healer, tarot lady sitting in a tent at a festival, to use those intuitive abilities, to use the gifts that you have that go beyond the physical senses, right? And Sarah, what you've shared here today, with particularly with the examples that you gave us, that was so tangible and so specific, and I hope that those of you who are listening, who are in other jobs other than like what I do, in not really in the spiritual arena, that you will see that how it benefits you to use these soul senses and go beyond the physical. But Sarah, just to continue a little bit more about you, because I know being a teacher, it can be quite a draining job. And I know there's certainly people who perhaps shouldn't be teachers, but they're doing it because, I don't know, the pay, or it's a job, or it was the best option, But then there are teachers who genuinely care and they still get burnt out and drained. So what are your practices to keep you so upbeat and happy? Because honestly, I've never seen and I've seen you at the end of the day. I've never seen you drained or like crawling to the door.
Well, honestly, Kasha, I really do love the interactions with the kids. And I think because I work with a very real curriculum and I have a real relationship with the children, it's not really so robotic. And each day is just so unique, and it's such a pleasure. The ideas that they have, the feelings that they share, the interactions that they have with each other is so beautiful. Honestly, like I don't have any kids myself, but I can see the joy in having them because they really just come with giving so much. I know it seems like I give a lot, but actually I get a lot back from them. And mm I I am a person that often spends time in nature, and with my kids, I also like to spend time in nature with them, my students. And how do I not get drained? Well, I think the draining part is really working more with the politics and the government and all the stipulations that they have with the no child left behind, yet everybody is left behind. This type of this for me is the stressful part of teaching, when a real curriculum isn't actually imposed, but these strategies which they think will reach every child. These are the things that really actually stress me out because I've seen time and time again that that doesn't really work. And for me, that's the frustrating part when I see that there's such an easier way for children to receive higher results in such an easier way. Why would we not be all doing it that way?
Oh, and it's interesting. I mean, it fascinates me so much because the way you speak about um, the children and what you get out of this, I really feel like the teachers that teach, because there's a curriculum, it's a job, whatever. I feel like they are here, like surface level. And so they got almost into this automatic practice, like this, we've described robotic practice of like, this is what's on the to-do list. We got to check them in. We got to do this. We got to do that. We got to breeze quickly through that. Time is, oh, we're running out of time here. We got to push here. And so it feels to me very much like they're this surface level, whereas, and that's perhaps where that stress comes in, because they are thinking more analytically of what they have to tick off their to-do list. But from what you've described, your ways of working, I feel like it's more, when we talk about meditation, I'm trying to describe this so it doesn't sound like I'm putting down other teachers, but it just, because I'm really good with like sort of seeing it in the energy space, and it really feels like, when we sit in meditation and we say, okay, you're either in your head or you're in the heart. I feel like a lot of teachers are in the head, but you seem to be in the heart, and the heart is open, it's expanded, it's quiet, it's peaceful. I don't know whether it has also to do with the fact that you spend a lot of time on the floor with them, which is a very grounding way, and it gives you really that, it connects you to that perception of how kids view the classroom, how they see things, instead of standing, like this talking at them. But I feel I can understand now why you wouldn't get so burnt out, maybe, versus teachers that are like here, like in the head, and they're just following that curriculum. So my question is, do you teach other teachers this, or do they come to you, do they ask, do you share, do you do lectures?
Interesting that you say that, because it is where I want to head my future, because as I said before, when you've seen things work so well, you can't not do them anymore. And really, I think teachers only change when there is evidence that it works. And so a lot of what I do is collecting evidence and sharing the successes of the kids. And so often, there are kids who have been labeled as, there's nothing going on upstairs, you can't get them to do anything. And it's just not true. You need to it's really not true. You need to get into their world and enter at their level, and, give them those small successes so that they're able to take, bigger risks and, get bigger ones. I worked a lot with the IB curriculum, which is an international curriculum, and it really develops people, characters, and attitudes and behaviors over specific skills. In this IB curriculum, it's very orientated at the kids' world, and it really teaches the kids how to learn. So instead of giving the facts and giving the strategies on how to do things, the kids really discover it. And they've got different lenses, they call them, on how to investigate something, like whether it's through the form, what it looks like, the causes that it creates, the responsibilities, that surrounds it from us or from other people. But these lenses help students investigate and develop a very broad picture of ideas and concepts and issues. So in this curriculum, I really, it only built upon this Reggio Emilia of the children's right, and that we're educating children right now, for right now, as well as into the future. Whereas this traditional curriculum just, aims at the future, without really like bringing going into the children's world and the reality that they live in now. Then they wonder why, children are depressed and why they're committing suicide at 12 and 13 years old. And this is just, atrocious. The system needs to be revised. And, I'm not saying to throw the baby out with the bathwater, not at all, not at all. But if you know what you need to teach, you can integrate that into the day, into the children's interest very seamlessly. It doesn't need to be, all right, today we are learning addition, now we are learning subtraction, now we are learning multiplication. You can learn all of those things, but you can learn them in a very meaningful way. And let's be honest, who wants to spend their days wasting it away in things that aren't meaningful to them? I know I don't. I know you don't. I know our listeners, they don't. So why are children different? This is why we talk about the rights of the children, and they have a right to enjoy their life now, and they have a right to study the things that they want to study. And it's our responsibilities as teachers to integrate that core material into their day.
That has inspired my next question. But before we go there, I always since I started doing this work, I'm always showing that we are just the custodians of our children. So as a parent, you're just a custodian. You don't own them. They're not your property. They're not your investment. You are their custodian. Now, I'm Polish, and in Poland, it's very competitive because university is free, education is free, like you don't pay anything. So obviously there's more students, then there's placements at universities, and this is one of the outdated models that I feel like someone needs to shake up. Yes, it's great that higher education are free, but in my opinion, from what I've seen, what I have experienced, the pressure that you feel as a child, the studying that happens outside of the school to be the best so that you can get into the university because your parents are investing in you, to me that is so sad, incredibly sad, because it's even the concept of like that homework. I feel like as an adult, when you finish work and you're working for someone else, you go home, you don't take your work with you. I mean, yes, there could be sometimes moments, but you get paid for it, right? I mean, I hope you're getting paid for it, but generally we don't take our work home. So why are we expecting kids to then stay up till late? And I'm really basing this off my experience with the Polish school system, where kids are still doing homework, and then they do homework school holidays and weekends, trying to be better, trying to keep up. It's so crazy, and these poor kids are so exhausted. And it's, again, like you said, to pass that test, to get that mark, to get that tick, and so many aren't really then living their purpose. They just are these little robots that go into these jobs that their parents think they will flourish, right? But the question that was inspired by your answer was, how can we then help our children not to become anxious, stressed teenagers that are depressed, or result to all sorts of coping mechanisms that aren't really positive?
Sure. Kausha, I don't know if you're aware, but actually studies have shown that homework does not actually increase the development of skills to the degree that we think it does. And for this reason, there are many schools that actually prescribe no homework. With the International Baccalaureate, which I worked very extensively with, they focus on, the bar to know that you are reaching, high standards is if the children are willingly going out of their way to take on projects outside of school. So if you're talking about length, for example, and then the next day a child comes in, they bring something and they want to measure it, or they go home and they want to measure it, that's showing you that that learning has gone inside the kids. It's ignited a passion. And now from inside, they're taking it that further. And that's what we really want the children in education, is to take their learning further, to extend it, not to be, oh, you know, you need to do this, I told you to do this, you better do this, but hey, I want to do this. I wonder if, and go do it. It's a complete paradigm shift, as opposed to, you know, that top down, or inspiring that growth up. And I think, you know, that answers, you know, your second question on what we can do to create a healthier, happier nation, is by, you know, inspiring. And we know children have a wealth of skills, a wealth of potential within them. And it's amazing, all these children that actually take action in the world. And we know this, I mean, this really illustrates the potential that children have. Greta, who's that child activist? Greta.
Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, I know who you're speaking of.
That's only one, but there's many children. If you ignite that passion in them, they will take it beyond. We've seen children fascinated with dinosaurs, and they can't stop talking about dinosaurs. That same passion is ignited in them.
Yeah.
And it can be ignited in them if you approach that and you find, you know, what ticks them, you know, whether you give them, like, the way, you know, all those different ways that we manipulate this energy to, you know, spark them and, you know, get their spirit racing.
And get them, yeah, because you guys are essentially sparks for them. Like, you essentially are inviting them to learn more about this, you know, like, get creative, get inspired, you know, want to know more about this, as opposed to you have to know this, right? Like, I've learned, I remember in school, in history, all these dates, and now, I mean, I know, you know, some, I don't remember all of them in history, but like, no one has ever asked me ever, you know, of something. It's just that if I ever found myself in a circle of historians, you know, maybe I could pull up some dates and that would make me look a little bit good. But like, really, what are the chances? So Sarah, yes.
No, Kash, I think it's so disappointing that schools waste so much time learning and relearning a concept, or, you know, spending all these times on these dates, which, as you said, like, it's so unnecessary to when you could be actually truly investigating, researching, producing, you know, refining, reiterating products,
But I
and,
think
you know,
it just
really building a life.
yeah, and inspiring children to think outside the box is supposed to all have to think the same way, right? If we want to create a nation of people, self-thinkers, people who are, you know, connected to that intuitive self, that trusting that intuition, as opposed to like, but it doesn't make sense, it's not logical. So
Well, Kath, sorry, I was
yeah,
going to say,
no, keep going.
In this 21st century, you know, now with the AI, creativity is, you know, the cornerstone of the next successes. You know, being able to create something and put it out into the world, to reiterate something, to improve something, and to be one of those out of the box thinkers is what every one of our students is going to need in order to survive their adult life. So
yeah. That is both exciting and frightening.
It is.
Sarah, so is there anything that you wished I'd asked that I didn't ask?
Sure, there's lots. I
I know we could talk for hours, but
think, like, is it possible to change, you know, the system that is in place? And I think it is. I think it is possible. And sharing the benefits of, you know, of the things that you've seen, and, you know, testing it out to see the results yourself, I think, is the answer. Definitely there needs to be a change, and the change really needs to come sooner than later. And yeah, I think standing strong in your experiences, and don't get me wrong, like I'm still learning, like, and expanding and improving, and I'm a lifelong learner, just as I want my children, my students to be. Um, but when you've seen something that works, like, to share that and encourage others, and exactly what you're doing by spreading the word. The energy is real, it exists, and we need to grow that inside of us, and as a community. And at the end of the day, people change through conversation, so not to get frustrated at those conversations, just to confront them and have evidence, so it's not just hearsay, it's not a guess, that it's researched.
I love that. I love what you said, because I hope that what will resonate for my listeners is, again, thinking about all the different people that listen from all different walks of life, different jobs. And sometimes we feel we want to save the world, we want to have an impact, but what can we do? We're so little, like, we can't change the world. And I think you're leading the way, Sarah, by showing us that, just working within your community, implementing these seemingly small changes that will then have this great big ripple effect, because you never know, what will happen to these amazing kids that are in your care, or the parents that will witness, perhaps they will be inspired to parent in a different way. I know you've inspired me to, like, look at even the parenting in a different way, and my children, just from this conversation, right? Not to mention other teachers. And I hope that if there's any teachers listening out there, I hope it didn't sound like I was putting down teachers, because I really know that, there's those genuine hardworking people who, show up and put aside their own agenda and show up for students, and they do the best with what they can. But sometimes we don't know what we don't know, and I feel like if you're listening to us here, to this conversation, to Sarah, perhaps there was something that has landed for you in a different way. Perhaps something that Sarah said has inspired you to maybe want to implement a different change in your classroom or in your parenting. Would it be okay if then we could put something in the show notes where people could connect with you and I don't know, pick your brains or have a mentoring session or
Absolutely.
something?
Absolutely. The more that we talk about this, the wider it spreads. So I wholly invite any conversation around this, and I look forward to speaking with you all again.
Beautiful. On that note, I hope you are able to take lots of takeaways from this conversation. And I want to thank you, Sarah, for being here, spending this hour with us. And thank you for coming. And
A
till
pleasure.
next week.
All right. Thank you so
Bye.
much. Bye for now.